Greetings and salutations, my dear audience. This is Joe St. Egg Benedictus, just coming at you with a bit of a long-term review, of a different sort. This is a Bible I have reviewed before, the New King James Minister Bible, and I'll link that review at the end of this video, but that particular review covered the whole thing. This is the Bible that has the manual in the middle. It's by Nelson. There's the back of the box if you want to see it. Let me see if I can get a good clear picture of that while I talk. Just want to give a shout out to my pal Micah, to all the visionaries and mystics out there. Thank you for watching. One of the things that I'm interested in here in the Egg household is how Bibles get used. And when I reviewed this Bible, I was using it primarily for funerals, and I still use it for funerals. But I wanted to give you an update of how I've been using it for funerals, a bit of a long-term review. I've had it for about 2 years now, I believe, maybe more, maybe 3 years. And I just wanted to give a more long-term review. I think I reviewed this about 2 years ago, so it's time for you to check it out. First of all, I always keep it in the box on my shelf at work. As you can see, the box, the corners are getting a little rough here, which is to be expected, but that's why I keep it in the box, because I want to make sure that the Bible itself doesn't get worn. Additionally, I only use it for funerals, so this stays on my shelf most of the time, except when I'm doing it for the funerals. There's the ISBN and all that. I bought this from christianbook.com, I believe. It's this soft leather, which is really nice. You can see it has the nice gold imprint on the side, Holy Bible. Nothing on the cover. Nice gilded edge. Now, okay, let's just do the basic first. First of all, because I keep it in the box, the gilding is still holding up very well, as well as the cover. There's a little bit of thread right there, as if you can see that. The ribbons, which I use all the time whenever I use the Bible, are holding up really well. As you can see, no fraying. The binding itself as well. There's a bit of a page here that's wonky. Let's see if I can get to it. So right there, okay. So here's a little bit of a wonky page. So we're going to even that out a little bit. You can wet it even a little bit just to get it malleable, and then close it up. Make sure to get it good. The ribbons, as I mentioned, hold up. The binding is holding up well. Let's see if there's any wear and tear on the seams. So far, so good. It's comfortable. It's easy to use. There are no tears here. The font is nice and large, so it's easy for public reading. The only thing I don't care about it using it this long, well, you know what? I'll tell you what I don't care about it later. I'll do all the negatives later, but for now, the positives. It's holding up well. The binding is good. It's a beautiful Bible. Last funeral I did, I read a text from Isaiah 49. As you can see, it's very clear. I prefer double columns rather than single columns, so for me, that's an important point. All right, and as you can see, the writing is big. So I use this for funerals. Let me show you how I use this. First of all, in the minister's manual, which is separated by this tab here, which is in between the testaments, I use primarily for funerals, and I keep my red tab here, red, purposefully to separate it from the brown, in the area where they give you funeral scriptures. Now, what's interesting about this is I often read Psalm 23 and John 14 in many sermons, or in many funerals, because most people request Psalm 23, and I really love preaching out of John 14. It's one of my favorite texts, and I often use it when there are no other requested citations, or if the person that I'm doing a homily for or a sermon for calls for a more nuanced scripture. For instance, the funeral I'm doing this week, I'm using a text from 2 Timothy. So what I'll do is I'll keep this red marker here, because again, this one never moves. That's the joy of having 3 markers, but the second one will float in the New Testament, and the first one will float either in the Old Testament, or if I need 2 texts in the New Testament, I may bring it over. But
This one will actually, we're going to do it now, 2 Timothy, since we're talking about it. Might as well go to it now. The Philippians, the 1 Timothy, and is it 2 Timothy? I believe I'm doing 3. So mark that with my other ribbon. Let me show you how else I use this Bible for funerals. As you can see, I wrote notes here. I have used red Omicron. There are additional texts if I have 1 Thessalonians. Here's 2 Timothy. This is part of what I'll be reading, but because of the nature of the homily, I'll be reading the whole passage of, I said chapter 3, it's chapter 4. So you have a swath of scriptures here, which I think this really works well. You can see ghosting or the bleed through on that Omicron pen. Let's see if we get it on the other side. Yeah, see? It might have been a different pen than an Omicron. Omicrons don't usually tend to bleed through that much. Elsewhere in the funeral sermons, I have been known to use the committal, which is only a couple pages from the scriptures. So all I have to do is just go back a few. At a graveside, you can do a committal. You can read the whole thing, and even you can actually do the committal through the benediction for a graveside, and that'll suffice. I may change it a little bit, but on the go. But to have everything at my fingertips, including the rest of the Bible as needed, is good. What I've done, however, is I've made this a sort of resource for funerals. So you'll notice when I opened the front, I took these two out because I keep these two in here. First of all, here's a handwritten committal that I have. Based on the words in this Bible, it's either this manual or a different manual. And I have a different, I've used this for different purposes as well. I've laminated it, as you can see. I probably could have typed it, printed it out, but I like the handwriting. It's laminated. My wife did that for me. And then this is something when I work with my local funeral home, they always do a cross for the family, and this is what they give you to read with the cross towards the end of a funeral. So I've changed it, and I keep my own. They're always impressed with me because they give me the cross to give to the family at the graveside, and they'll say, "Here's, please give this cross to the family for your benediction, and if you'd like to read this," and I say, "Yep, I got my own." So I've worked with them for a long time, and I appreciate that relationship. But what I've done is I've made a habit of collecting various resources for funerals, and having the Bible in the box gives me an advantage of keeping my resources all in one place with the Bible. So whenever I have a funeral, I can flip through these resources. I'll have the Bible, the box, the resources all at my fingertips, and then pray about what needs to be said over the life of a loved one. And these basically are various sermon outlines, and really they're 4 ideas. These were at one point specific to people, but what I've done is, because I appreciate the outline, I've just kept it, laminated it, so that I have not a rubric, because you don't want to preach the same sermon for every person, but a place to start. So this is based on John 14. Jesus is a gift. Jesus is a delight. I have a psalm there for that. Jesus gives us purpose, and Jesus gives us peace. Let not your hearts be troubled. I talk about, this was an Easter text, which is important for a funeral. Psalm 70, I have various psalms here. And this one, Psalm 73:26, my body may fail, but God is my strength and my portion. So there are various resources here, as you can see, that I've used. This is a copy from Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. There's a conversation about death here, and I found it to be very interesting, and I photocopied it because you never know when it might be useful to have. I wouldn't, necessarily quote Fahrenheit 451, but it strikes ideas. Poetry is also important when it comes to funerals. Here's another handwritten note. I
I called it a funeral song based on 2 Corinthians 3. This was actually just a generic writing I came up with one night. I was probably reading 2 Corinthians and just had inspiration, so keep hold of that. Here's a card with a quote from Chrysostom. Weep as if bidding farewell to one setting out on a journey. This is from Tom Long, who wrote a book on funerals. And this is a quote from him. The fact is that people die pretty much as they have lived. A person who blessed the world at death has been shaped to live a life of blessing. The best preparation for dying a Christian death, then, is living a Christian life. So that's Thomas Long. Here's some quotes by John Claypool. I also have a mention of William Sloane Coffin. John Claypool wrote a book called, what is it? Travelers on a Fellow... it'll come to me. John Claypool. Anyway, he wrote about journeying through leukemia with his young daughter, and he wrote a series of sermons after coming back to the pulpit, and wrote some really powerful sermons. I can't think of the name right now. Fellow Travelers on a Journey, maybe. He wrote this masterful sermon on his first Sunday back after the death of his daughter, on Abraham and Isaac, and it's, if you want to read it, just look up John Claypool, Travelers on a Fellow Travelers on a Journey, or something like that. Read the sermon on Abraham and Isaac, and make sure you have tissue box. I remember reading that in an airport, waiting for my flight, trying to cover my tears. And I knew John Claypool personally, so I've known him, and he taught at my seminary for a while. These are various things I've come up with. Promises of challenges moving for children funerals, limited concentric. I don't know where I got this from. Abraham and Sarah provide an alternative. Age is only a number. I'm not sure. Who knows? Let's see. These are notes I took from listening to a funeral sermon. One of our old pastors of my church came back to preach a sermon, and he had some points in his sermon that I wanted to take notes on. When Jesus says in John 14, "I will come and receive you unto myself," he stated that when he reads that, he thinks of a receiving blanket. When a person is born into this life, the parents receive that person in a receiving blanket, and he likens the reception we have when we die and go to heaven with a parent receiving his child as his own. So I took note of that. Here's another John 14 outline. I always talk about the grief of the disciples and Jesus' farewell address. And then Thomas asks a question, what are we to do? And then I talk about how Jesus provides comfort, Jesus prepares a dwelling place, and Jesus shifts from a place to a person. I am the way. So here's another one, the gift of life, the grief of loss, 4 gifts of God in time of grief. From Strunk, I stole from the funeral home. I stole this. This is what you put in your car. I never gave it back because I forget. And then I have a sticky note because you never know if you're at a funeral. This box, by the way, comes to me and it goes in my car when I go to the funeral. So I literally put this in the back of my car, get to the funeral, get ready, get my coat on, my suit coat, go to the back of the car, and this box is there with my Bible, with any notes. But you never know when you need to make a change in the sermon, or if a thought comes. You never know when somebody's going to mention something that you need to remember in the service. So always keep sticky notes in here. It doesn't take up a lot of room. There are only a few sticky notes, as you can see, but you always want to be prepared when you're comforting a family and bringing relief and some sense of comfort and of God's presence. So there you go. There you have it. Oh, let's talk about some of the negatives. Let me see what... Yeah. Okay. The only real negative I have of this, because I really do love this Bible, is that it's a New King James Version. What's interesting is Psalm 23 reads best only when it's in the King James. And thankfully, the funeral scriptures are, especially Psalm 23, within the King James Version. So I like that about the Bible, but other than the fact that it's New King James, when I preach outside of these scripture texts,
I always have to measure it against my other translations because I'm not a New King James guy. I don't have anything I'm not opposed to it, just not used to it. It's not where I call home in my Bible translations. However, the other thing I do not like about this is the red letter. So thankfully I read John 14 from the middle, but if I ever have to read something else by Jesus, like John 15, I abide in you and you abide in me, you can see there's a whole lot of red in John 15 and 16. You can see I underlined a few things that I might have marked along the way, but I'm not a big red letter fan. It doesn't bother me to the extent that I cringe every time I open it. I'm just saying it's one of the things that you need to be aware of if you're going to purchase this particular Bible. Again, I told you the manual is in the middle whenever I have a wedding or something. Building dedication, we're doing a dedication in a couple months, so I looked up dedications. Child dedication, I've used this before for my child dedication. I should include that. You can see I have numbers. So like number 1, that's the scripture to read, which is Deuteronomy 6, which I believe is back here maybe. Then number 2, I do the introduction. Number 3, I do these sentences. Number 4, I skip down here to the prayer. Oh, here's the scripture reading right here, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. So I have my little star here, go here, and then I use this. So I do use this for child dedications. I focus primarily on funerals, but every once in a while, maybe once a year, we have a child dedication. So I use it for that as well. Beautiful Bible, handsome, feels great in the hand, not too heavy, easy to read, and when you keep it in the box, good to go. It's good!